So yesterday we spoke about two of the discourses. It was actually discourse 4 and discourse 9. So those were the two lion discourses, and just to jog our memories, the essential teaching of the first lion discourse is that kibr, or arrogance, as this state of our lower self, is the biggest veil. And because of it, we actually think that our enemy is outside of us. And we become irritated by others and we're fighting outside of us. But really the teaching is that we need to overcome ourselves, right? The great warrior is not the one who breaks the ranks of his enemy in battle, but the great warrior, as Rumi said, is the one who conquers his lower self. And every spiritual teaching has this at its core. May Allah give us victory over our lower self, inshallah. And so arrogance is this great veil on the path, and we have to surrender our ego self to a higher wisdom, and this is the meaning of it, putting it in the well, getting rid of that. And then the second story is about really alignment of the self, the nafs, and the intellect with the spirit, and not having separateness. Right? It's interesting, even in English, we talk about integration, and the same root integrity comes from this. The awliya, or the siddiqun, which you could say the people of integrity, the people of integration. Most of us, we're pulled in many different directions, right? We have the light and we have the dark, and right? Sometimes we take a step forward, sometimes we take a step back. But people that really attain this type of integration is that their spirit is illuminated, their very selfhood, and their intellect becomes this illuminated consciousness. And there's no wolf saying, "Give me some," from the lion of the spirit, right? So this was that lesson, is to be integrated and to give it all to the Spirit. No. So, of course, the 9th discourse gives some foreshadowing at what's possible. But we're going to jump back to the 6th discourse, so it's right in the center, right? There's 12 discourses, so the end of discourse 6, right, between 6 and 7, is actually the heart of book 1. And Rumi very masterfully is going to put the central message of book 1, of the transformation of the nafs, at the heart of it. So again, we'll just summarize the discourse, and then we'll maybe read a passage or two, and we'll discuss the symbolism, and inshallah open up for discussion. Yeah, sure. So I sent everyone a link to the book 1 in the Mathnawi, which has the Arabic and Persian. It's line 1550, but we're not going to read that exact line. I'll mention the lines that we'll read when I do read them. It's not page 15, it's line 1550. I don't know what page it is, but if you scroll, you see the line numbers. 1550. But just to summarize, and this is again kind of a funny story, but it gets at something deeper. So let's listen, inshallah, from the level of narrative and then the level of symbolism, and see if we can understand what Rumi's getting at. So this discourse is that there was a merchant who had a parrot. And this merchant loved his parrot. And the parrot had the most beautiful voice. And he would sing and speak. And so he was his pride and joy, this parrot. And he had him in this beautiful cage. Beautiful cage because he loved his parrot. So Rumi says that this merchant was going to India to trade for business. And so he asked his household, "What would you all like me to bring you back from India?" And the parrot said, "I don't want anything to be brought back. I just ask that you tell the parrots there about my plight. That a parrot here is in prison by divine destiny and yearns for you. She greets you and asks for justice and guidance. She says, is it right that I should die in grief in separation from you, that I should be imprisoned while you are in the rose garden? So this is what the parrot asks to be conveyed. And so the merchant says, sure, I'll go. So he goes to India and he's trading, and one day he comes upon a tree that's full of parrots. And he remembers his parrot that he yearns for and misses. So he says, oh, parrots, I have a message from my beloved parrot at home. And he conveys the message. My parrot says, it is in a state of plight, and it is separate, and it is asking you for guidance about its situation. And when he conveys this, one of the parrots drops dead out of the tree. And then Rumi gets into this discourse where the merchant says, what have I said? What have I done? Oh no, I've killed this poor parrot. And then this discourse about the dangers of the tongue. Right? A word you say can heal. A word you say can kill. Right? Wars are waged because of a tongue. Right? And peace is brought because of a tongue. And so he has this beautiful kind of, these lines about the tongue. So he's in this remorseful state, like, what have I done? But he's confused, like, how could this have happened? So he doesn't know what to do, so he just returns back to home. And when he gets home, he tells his parrot. The parrot says, did you convey my message? Actually, before I do that, let me... So he has this discourse on Toba in the tongue. So he says, if you can hear this discourse, become a seeker and shed tears, because by means of tears, Adam escaped from blame. Right, Toba. Tears representing Toba. And tears are the speech of the penitent. Adam came to earth to weep, so if you are from him, then seek forgiveness. The garden blooms from the sun of grief and the water of tears. But what do you know of tears, you bread lover? Empty of bread, you will fill with tears. Right? So Rumi is inserting these wisdom in this discourse. And so what's the point here is that we should be in a state of humble submission to Allah. Right? Feeling our separation and feeling our shortcoming. This is not some like low self-esteem or self-worth, no. This is understanding actually that we have the greatest jewel inside of us. That Allah said that the heavens and earth cannot embrace me, but the heart of my servant can embrace me. And then to feel, but we have fallen short of this great trust. And it's through humility and humble and being humble and turning back constantly and being aware of our faults and our shortcomings and the tricks of our ego that we can actually truly make tawbah and truly turn and return. And so he says, what do you know of tears, you bread lover? Right? You just love eating bread and doing things, but no. Empty yourself of bread and fill yourself with tears. He said, we think of tears, but they're actually pearls. You're shedding pearls. So this is why, the state of the Sufis, often that they will go through these states but there's a state where almost like sadness and joy, they're indistinguishable. Right? But really it's about getting the ego out of the way. And he sets up this story, right? Iblis, right? He made this grave mistake and then he defended his actions. But I'm better than him. But Adam made this mistake and Eve and ate from the tree. In the Quran, it's not Eve's fault. That's in the Bible. In the Quran, they ate together. And they're not cast out because of that, because when they are shown that they have made this mistake, they immediately turn and ask forgiveness. And Allah says, I forgive you. It's not like this great original sin. There's no original sin in Islam. There's original primordial. Our primordial state is light and luminosity. But we're forgetful of that. So Adam was showing us that forgetfulness that's built into us. And so when we are forgetful, we turn back. And we humbly ask Allah to guide us and to forgive us and to grant us more light. And Allah does this to Adam. And right, Rumi is saying Adam escaped from blame because of these tears, because he was sincere in his turning back. And anyone who's sincere in their tawbah, no matter what they've done, anyone who's sincere, Allah will forgive. Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Nothing you have done is greater than Allah's mercy. And if you think it is, that's your only sin. You think your sin is bigger than Allah's mercy? La ilaha illallah. No. So this is the state of humility. So Rumi, again, in the speech of this merchant, he inserts these profound teachings. So he's telling these stories, but then there's all these perspective changes in the story. One time it'll be the narrator of the story, then it'll be in the voice of a character in the story, then it will be Rumi's own voice as this great sage giving this teaching. This perspectival change is a central part of the discourse. So eventually the merchant returns and he gives out his gifts to his household, and the parrot asks what happened. And the merchant says, and he's full of remorse, he says, "I'm sorry to inform you, but it seems that the message delivered was inconsiderate, because upon hearing this, the pain of one of the parrots actually caused him to die." And he said, somehow that parrot must have been connected to you. You must have been like one spirit, because just hearing of your situation, it died immediately. And so the merchant tells the parrot, he said, "I'm very sorry that I even said it, and I've made tawbah from that." And then he says, "A word from the tongue is like an arrow from the bow. Once it's gone, it's not recoverable. So watch what you say, because words are like that." Right? Words are like arrows. Say, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me." We taught that. And that's maybe good to tell children so that they're not impacted. But we should know, as individuals, a word we can say has a big impact. You could say a word that you won't think of anything, and it will plunge you 70 years into the fire, the Prophet ﷺ said. Allah forgive us. The tongue is a sword. You can cut with it, or you can be cut by it. It's a very sharp sword. So this is part of the discourse that he goes. So anyway, he said, "I'm sorry to inform you that when I told this other parrot in India about your state, immediately this parrot died." And right when he tells his parrot that, his parrot dies and falls to the bottom of the cage. And now he starts to weep and cry because he loved this parrot. This was his most prized possession. This was his beloved thing, and its sweet voice would keep him company. And he says, "Oh, alas for my sweet voiced friend and confidant who I gained so cheaply and quickly turned away from. O tongue, you have done me great damage. You are both a treasure and a disease without remedy. You have made my bird fly away. These cries of alas are caused by the idea of the beloved and my state of separation. Where is there a heart not shattered by God's love? Alas for my clever bird that interpreted my thoughts and consciousness and told me what should come to me so I might remember." No. And then Rumi gives a little bit of this insight. He says, the parrot is in you whose voice is inspired and was before creation. You were burning the soul for the sake of the body, but I am burning with love. So anyway, he goes through this long, long passage of lament, the merchant's lament, this weeping and crying. And eventually, as he's crying and crying, he opens the cage, and as he's weeping, he takes the body of his parrot and he's trembling in tears. And all of a sudden, the parrot comes to life and flies to the highest branch. And he looks up and he said, "Wait, what's happening?" what's happening. And the discourse then continues. He says, essentially he says, I understood that parrot was teaching me a lesson. And that, in fact, it is my voice and my beauty that has kept me enslaved. And I kept thinking that if I sing more beautifully, maybe I'll get free. And at first, I loved this cage because you honored me and you made it a beautiful cage and a gilded cage and gave me everything. But slowly, I started to realize, no matter how beautiful the cage was, it's a cage. And I'm not free. And I couldn't figure out what it was to do. I thought maybe if I'm more beautiful and I sing more beautifully, I can get out. But the more beautiful I sang, the more you loved me. And even though you loved me, it was your love that kept me in this cage. And what this parrot taught me is that I have to die to be free. I have to die before I die. I have to let go of all of those things which are keeping me in this cage. So, inshallah, we'll find a section to read to get to this, and then we'll talk about the symbolism. He says, after that, he cast her out of the cage. The parrot flew to a lofty branch. The dead parrot made such a swift flight as when the orient sun rushed onward. The merchant was amazed at the action of the bird. Without understanding, he suddenly beheld the mysteries of the bird. He lifted up his face and said, O nightingale, give us instruction by explaining what has happened. What did the parrot in India do? What caused you to learn? What was this trick? The parrot said, she by her act counseled me, abandon thy charm of voice and the affection of your master, because your voice has brought you into bondage. She feigned herself dead for the sake of giving me this counsel, meaning to say, O you who has become a singer to high and low, become dead like me, that you may gain release. And then Rumi gets into this commentary that explains one level of commentary on the cage of reputation. The cage of reputation. He says, the body is cage-like. The body, amidst the praises of those who come in and go out, become a thorn to the soul. This one says to him, I will be your friend. And that one says, no, I am your partner. This one says to him, there is none in existence like you for beauty and eminence and kindness and liberality. That one says to him, both the worlds are yours, and everyone is nothing compared to you. When he sees the people intoxicated with him, because of arrogance, he loses adab. He does not know that Shaitan has cast thousands like him into the river of destruction. The world's flattery and hypocrisy is a sweet morsel. Eat less of it, for it is a morsel full of fire. The fire is hidden and its taste is manifest. Its smoke becomes visible in the end. Do not say, how should I swallow that praise? He who is praising you is speaking from desire for reward. If your praiser should mock you in public, your heart would burn for days on account of these scorches, although you know that he only said it in disappointment because the hopes he had of you brought him no gain. Yet the effect thereof is remaining with you. The same experience happens to you in the case of praise. The effect of that too lasts for many days and becomes a source of arrogance and deception of the soul. But it does not show itself because praise is sweet. In the case of blame, the evil shows itself because blame is bitter. If you eat halwa, any sweet things, the taste is momentary. The effect is enduring forever. Since it does not endure perceptibly, it endures imperceptibly. Recognize every opposite by means of its opposite. When the effect of sugar endures, after a while it produces boils that call for the lancet. Right? Eat too much sugar has negative consequences. Pharaoh was made by abundance of praise. Be lowly of spirit through meekness. Do not domineer. So far as you can, become a slave, not a monarch. Suffer blows. Become like the ball. Do not be the bat. Otherwise, when this elegance and beauty remains with you no more, you will be loathed by those companions. The set of people who used to flatter you deceitfully, when they behold you, will call you a devil. So he goes on, but this gives a sense of what he's getting at. This cage of reputation. And particularly, he's talking about the fleeting reputation of the world, because he's mentioning that most people praise you with self-interest. Right? When things are going well with you or when things are going good, they praise you because they want to be near you. We talk about fair weather friends. Right? Listening with this interview with Mike Tyson. You know, he was the champion, the king of the world. And he had all this money and wealth, and he came from nothing, so he was just spending it on everyone around him. He was buying tigers and all kind of things, right? Famously. But then all these people came to him, including some of his managers, and his trainer, Castamado, who was like a father to him, passed away. And then he was vulnerable. Because he was this young man in his early 20s still. Came from nothing. And all these people started to steal from him. Say, we'll manage your money. We'll be your friends. Here, just give us this. And he said, I lost all my money, and that was the best thing that happened to me. Because I saw who was my real friend. When things were going good, everyone loved me. But when I lost it all, almost everyone left. And I saw who was real. So this is what Rumi is saying. He's saying most of the praise of the world is just self-interested. Right? He said the people that praise you, that were they not to be able to receive something from you, then they would hate you. Right? Then they would blame you and mock you in public. Right? And so you love that they praise you, and it becomes like sweet. It's like candy. Ooh, they're praising me. He said, but were they to blame you, it would be bitter. But he said it's interesting because if you're blamed, you're going to remember that. Right? So like 1,000 positive likes or comments on YouTube, yeah, we feel good. One negative comment, you remember that for weeks, huh? Because we select towards blame, right? But he's saying, though the bitterness will remain with you, he said that the praise, it's sweeter, so you like it, but it also has an effect, even though it's more subtle. Right? And he uses sugar, which is interesting because now we know, like, you eat too much sugar, it's like diabetes comes eventually. Right? Sweet, sweet, sweet. At first, it's just a little bit, but then you're actually poisoning yourself. You're poisoning your body. So he's saying a lot of praise, it's just, you won't notice it, but eventually it will actually cause your ego to grow. And you start to believe your own hype. You start to drink your own Kool-Aid, right? And so, again, this discourse is for serious seekers on the path. And it's saying if we're serious about the path, we will beware of the cage of reputation. And this is why the Sufis, they say you're not a Sufi until it is equal to you whether people praise you or blame you. This is a high maqam. This is a high station, because we like to be praised and we dislike. Right? And there's a story of Imam Ghazali that he was a great scholar, but then he went into seclusion because he realized that there was a cage of reputation in being a scholar. So he left that for 10 years. And he would don the robes of a poor man, and he would sweep the mosque in Damascus. right? He was from Baghdad. So in those days, even if you were famous, he was famous in his lifetime, but there was no pictures or videos or YouTube. So you could be famous in one place and then go to another place and don the robes of a beggar and no one would know who you were. So he could be inconspicuous. So once he was in the mosque and he was doing his dhikr silently, and there was a sheikh teaching his circle of disciples and he overheard them say, Qala Imam al-Ghazali. Imam al-Ghazali said, right, quoting him as a great authority, even though he was over there in secret. And he said when he heard this, something in him liked it. He said, But because he had been doing this work, he said, ooh, I still have work to do. Until it is the same to me, whether they praise me or blame me, I'm not completely sincere with Allah. I'm not completely sincere with Allah. Of course, this is a high station, but this is what we strive for. And one of the things that we recommend, because on the path, when people praise you, it can be like really awkward and you feel, always see it as a dua. When people praise you, just say, Ameen. Ameen. May I really be like that? And this is why the Sufis, they will say, when people praise them, they say, you praise me for what you see, but I look in myself and I see my shortcomings. It's not about having low self-esteem or negative self-worth. It's about knowing that we have the precious jewel, the jewel of creation inside of us, that the hidden treasure that loved to be known has hid this treasure in the treasure chest of our chest. But we just want to protect ourselves from our ego overhearing that. Our ego trying to usurp the throne. So this is what Rumi is getting at. This cage of reputation. No. So don't take it too seriously when people praise you, and don't take it too seriously when they blame you. This is the goal. So then Rumi, in line 1905 or thereabouts, the end of the discourse, he gives the symbolism. Sometimes he'll give the symbolism directly. He says, in the presence of Joseph, do not give airs and behave like a beauty. Offer nothing but the supplication and sighs of Jacob. That's what the Shaykh was talking about last night. Right, in the story, in the Quran, right, Jacob, Yaqub alayhi salam, is of course the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, Joseph. And when Joseph is taken by his brothers, and right, Jacob yearns for his son who's gone, and he only has his shirt. They bring his shirt back, and so he yearns for him. Now, it is said, of course, that Joseph was the most beautiful, that half of beauty was given to him. He had this immense beauty, physical beauty. They say Aisha radiallahu anha, when she heard that, she said the Prophet was given all of beauty, sallallahu alayhi. But Rumi uses Joseph as a symbol to symbolize Allah, the divine beauty. Inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbu jamal. Indeed, Allah is beautiful and loves beauty. Right? So all beauty is from Allah. So he's saying, don't try to be the beauty yourself. Be the one who yearns for the beautiful one. Right? Don't try to be the beloved, be the lover. Right? Be Jacob in the story who yearns for Joseph. Don't try to be like, I'm the beautiful one. No. Because it's through humility that you will attain. No. And then he says, the means of dying as conveyed by the parrot. So now he's going to sometimes he just tells the symbolism. What is he getting at? The means of dying as conveyed by the parrot was niyaz. Niyaz means, it can mean supplication, it can mean humility, it can mean lowering oneself, but it's almost like this state of what we do in prayer, like this, like turning up in need, feeling your need. And then he says, and poverty, faqr. They're called the dervish or the fuqara, means poverty, means need. Right? So it's like emptying your cup. Being humble, being in need, and then Allah will fill you. As long as you're full, the cupbearer will be like, oh, the cup's full, right? You know, if you're at the house of a generous host, they're going to look whose cup is empty. And whenever it's empty, they're going to rush to fill it. But as long as your cup is full, you're not going to receive anything more. You have to empty your cup of yourself. And then Al-Kareem, Allah, generosity itself, will pour. So this is, he said, the meaning of death is this, being in this state. Niyaz, faqr. The Sufis are called the fuqara because this is pure humility. And it's interesting we think about lowering ourselves because symbolism in our traditions that water represents divine mercy, rahmah, water. And also it represents ma'rifah, spiritual experience. And in creation we look, where does water seek? It will never stop until it finds the lowest place. It will not be content until it finds the lowest place, and then it will stop. So whoever humbles himself more receives the divine mercy. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, you are closest to Allah when you're in prostration. Because this is the physical act that represents complete selflessness, complete humility. And Rumi says, give up your drop, right? So we're like each a drop of water. He says, give up your droppiness and become the ocean. Right? You think yourself a drop in the ocean, but you're the entire ocean in a drop. But we can't walk around like, I'm a drop, look at me, I'm a special drop. He's saying, fall to the surface. What happens when a raindrop falls to the sea? Where did it go? Just the sea. When you attain this state, you are the sea. So this is what he's saying. And this more is the exact center point of in the entire of book 1. So this is the central message of book 1, which is the theme of the nafs. If you want to transcend your nafs, your individuated selfhood, your ego self, niyaz and faqr. This humility, this spiritual poverty, and this turning completely. This is the essence. This is the essence. No. And this is why the cage of reputation, because as long as people praise you, your cup becomes more full. Ooh, they're pouring in. If they're pouring in and you're content with the praise of people, then you're not going to, there's a story that someone came to a sheikh and he was a bit full of himself, this person. He had studied a lot. So he went to the sheikh and the sheikh was serving tea. And so he said, tell me about yourself. And he said, I've studied so-and-so with so-and-so, and I studied this with so-and-so, and I have ijazah, and I have this, and I have this. And the sheikh was listening, and he kept pouring. He said, wow. And then it started to overflow, and he kept pouring. He said, wow. And the man was talking, and he looked. He said, stop pouring. What are you doing? It's overflowing. And he said, you're like this cup. You're just overflowing. He said, how can I pour anything in you? You're just so full already of yourself. Allah forgive us. And one of our beloved Sheikh Muhammad Jilani, he told us that his father, he was in the Sahara Desert and he was studying with some of the great scholars, and he studied many things. His father sent him to study with different scholars. Then when he came back to his father after a number of years and he brought his ijazahs, his the traditional way you would get you could call it diploma, but it's a license that you have studied this in a chain of transmission, and it gives you the license to then teach it. So a master would say, you have ijazah. So he showed his father all his ijazahs, and his father said, very nice. And he took them and he threw them in the fire. He burned them all. To teach him, like, okay, you got that? Now let go. Let go of every claim. And, these are how the people of Allah would be. They would be very mindful of the way that the cage of reputation can harm. And of course, on the spiritual path, self-righteousness is a big danger, right? Because the thing is, the ego, when it gets some truth, the ego, the lower self, if it can't reject the truth, it's very tricky. So if it can't reject the truth, it will say, okay, I can't reject the truth. This person is making me submit to the truth. But then it will try to co-opt the truth and become like a spiritualized ego. Okay, if I can't reject it, then I'm going to try to co-opt it and be like, I right? My Sufi order, my tariqah, or my group, or I've had this experience, and it's very dangerous. So may Allah protect us from our lower self. This is also the importance of community, suhbah, and also those more mature than us on the path, guides, because they'll see, and they'll help us to overcome this trick of the nafs. So this is the center of book 1, the transforming of the nafs, and the central message, of course, of this parrot is mutu qabla an tamutu. This famous saying of the Sufis, in a sense you could say the motto of the Sufis, die before you die. Die before you die. What does it mean? Of course, it doesn't mean that you kill yourself. La. It means you kill off that part of yourself which is your illusory self, the ego self. That's what it means. It means you let go of that. You let that die. The illusory self that you identify with. Me, I. Even now people say, I identify as. It's the nafs. It wants to identify as everything. I identify as. Let go of that. Right? Let go of whatever you identify as. Identify as a servant. The Prophet ﷺ said, and this was also commented on in the song of the Qasida of Imam al-Haddad that our brothers sung, when he said, Ana abdun sara fakhri. I'm a slave whose pride is my poverty. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Faqru fakhri. In Arabic it has a beautiful resonance. Faqru fakhri means my poverty is my pride. It's that what I'm proud of is that I need Allah. Is that I'm a servant of Allah. Is that Allah created me. It's not any of these outward things. This is what our pride should be. Right? Pride is a strange word in English because it can be positive or negative. Kibr can never be positive. Kibr is like arrogance. But fakhr in Arabic, it can be like we use pride. Fakhr can be a positive thing. Like Fakhr ad-Din is a name. So the Prophet ﷺ is, and this is one of the great secrets, right? Those that lower themselves most rise the highest, ascend the highest. Right? This is one of the great secrets. And one of our sheikhs, Habib Ali al-Jifri, great sage of our time, he was once asked, he said, when you were a young student, how did you receive your fatah, your opening? He said, I received my opening when I sincerely prayed that everyone studying with me would receive their opening before me. That's when Allah gave me my opening. So one of the definitions of love is decentering the self. Decentering the self. That's why love is so powerful. Because when you really love someone, it's truly altruistic. You love them, you want good for them, not for anything that you can receive from them. Right? So it's like a woman came with her new husband, and she said, and they came like almost like marital counseling, and she was really upset. She said, my husband, he said he loves me fi sabilillah. What's wrong with that? She said, he loves me for the sake of God, right? So what's wrong with that? She said, he just loves me out of some religious obligation, like because God commanded me. He doesn't just love me for me. No, fi sabilillah does not like that. Fi sabilillah means I love you altruistically. I love you not for anything I can get. I love you not as a means to something, but as an ends in yourself. False love substitute is when I love you for something you can give me. This is like this cage of reputation. This is false love. This is like, I love you for what I can get from you. This is not real love. True love is, I love you. And I want good for you, even if I have nothing to do with it. Even if I never benefit from it. Even if it has nothing to do with me. This is fi sabilillah. Just for the sake of Allah. This is true love. This is true love. And the opposite of fi sabilillah is self-interested, right? I love you, I'll become your friend, right? Because I want something from you, May Allah make us true lovers and give us true love and make us sincere. And may Allah give us the ability to decenter ourselves. Again, when you truly love someone, it's not about what you love. You think about your beloved, oh, this is what they would love. And this is also the sunnah. People talk about the sunnah, sometimes they're like mad, sunnah, 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 my beard is my pant length. They haven't understood the first thing of the sunnah. The sunnah is love. Sayyidina Anas, who was a boy, his mother was poor, and she said, I wish I could give the Prophet something, sallallahu alaihi, but I don't have anything to give him, so I'll give him my son to live with him and serve him. Her beloved son. So he grew up in the household of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi. The Prophet loved him. And this is a miracle. If no other miracle or proof of prophecy, Anas said later, he said, my whole life, and he said, he was a boy. He said, never once. The Prophet raised him. He was like a stepfather to him. He said, never once did I do something, and the Prophet said, why did you do that? Or not do something, and he said, why didn't you do that? Never once. Anyone who's tried to raise a child knows this is enough of a miracle. This is impossible for us, you know. This is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He never expressed this. He said never even did he say, oof, like not even any the slightest displeasure. This is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi. But once Anas said he was with the Prophet and they were invited to someone's house and they were served a dish. And this dish included like pumpkin, little pieces of pumpkin in it. And he noticed that the Prophet ﷺ was eating the pumpkin, like reaching for it, that he liked this. And so he started to take the pumpkin from his side of the plate. Of course, they ate from shared platters and put it towards the Prophet. And then he said something. And again, he's narrating this much later, after the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. He said, from that day forward, pumpkin has become the most beloved food for me. He didn't just say, and from that day forward, I follow the sunnah and I eat pumpkin. No, he said love. He said, actually changed the taste of pumpkin for me. The sunnah is love. It's not I follow out of an obligation. It's actually love transforms your love. The Prophet ﷺ said, none of you truly believe until he loves for his brother or sister what he loves for himself. Right? And this is in humanity. You don't believe until you love for everyone what you love for yourself. But he also said, sallallahu alaihi, none of you truly believe until his desires accord with what I have brought. Right? This is actually this alignment. Because we have some desires that are good and some desires that are not. But when we surrender, we think not only what do I want, but what would the Prophet love? What would the Prophet do? Right? When we forego what we might like, oh, but the Prophet would love this instead, and we do that, this is alignment. And it's hard to do that except by love. When you love, it's easy. When you love someone, it's easy. You want to imitate them. I remember this just thinking back. So I had in my neighborhood, there was a older kid. You know, when I was maybe 10, he was like a teenager. He was named Isaac. And he was a very good athlete. And I thought he was the coolest person in the world when I was 10. You know, you look up to these older kids. And he was like a great football player and all these things. And he would play with me. Like he was like nice to me and things. So I loved him. And I went over to his house once. This is a true story. And it's hilarious to think back on this. For some reason, he used to love to eat pickles and V8 juice. So I would go to his house and he was eating pickles and V8 juice. And as a 10-year-old, I hated pickles and V8 juice. But after going to his house, I went to my mom. I said, Mom, buy V8 juice and pickles. And I would drink it when I was at home because I loved him. I looked up to him. And I actually started to like pickles and V8 juice. What 10-year-old does this? But this is the reality of love. And we all model ourselves on people. We all emulate. And so this is the purpose of these prophets and guides and messengers. We look at them, we want to model ourselves on them. We want to emulate them in the smallest way. And we find that nothing they did was small. And this is why, Habib Ali, the same one I mentioned, he got this opening. His sheikh was Habib Abdul Qadir al-Saggaf, who was one of the greatest awliya of the previous generation. And he lived with him and studied with him. And then he read the Shama'il, which some of you have read. It's a description of how the Prophet was. It's a collection of hadith about how he was, how he lived, how he dressed. Beautiful collection to study. And he said when he studied it, he said, I already knew this book by heart because everything in that book I had seen in my teacher. Down to how he washed his hands. Down to how he greeted people. So he said, I've already seen this, but I didn't know that it was from the Prophet. Sallallahu Alaihi. So these living examples give us this. Just to tell a story of Abdul Qadir al-Saggaf, because when the great ones are mentioned, the hearts are opened. And this is a true story that Habib Ali told, that he witnessed. That they were in a gathering, and then they were leaving. And they got in their car, and Habib Abdul Qadir was in the passenger seat, and there was a driver, and there was a man who came out who really loved him. Right? This was like my sheikh, and he loved him. And so the sheikh got in the car, and the man shut the door, and they were speaking through the window, and he was greeting him, and he was telling him, I love you, and they were just speaking for like 5 minutes. And then eventually they depart and they go. And as they get to the street and turn, he says to Habib Ali, he says, stop the car and come over to my door and open it because my hand is shut in the door. And he like, why didn't you say something? Like the door shut 5 minutes ago. And he like rushed, and he said, why didn't you say something? He said, it would have broken his hand. It would have broken his heart to know that he shut my hand in the door. These are these people. This is the level of care and concern they have for people. And another one of the stories of Abdul Qadir al-Saggaf is that he lived in Jeddah. His ancestral homeland was Yemen, but he was in Jeddah in Arabia. And one of these very wealthy oil people from Saudi Arabia came and loved him and gave him this bag full of money, like millions of riyal. And the driver, he came to his driver and he said, let's go around. And he drove to all these places where he knew families that were poor or families that were in difficulty, and he distributed. And the driver said it took hours because it was so much money, like all day, until late at night we were going around. And he said at the end he took the bag and he shook it to make sure there was not a single bill in it. And then he turned and he said, oh Allah, bear witness that I have discharged the trust. This is their state. They see everything as like, okay, whatever Allah gives me, it's only His test. How will I use it? So may we be like this, inshallah. Now.